A memorial for disability rights leader Bob Kafka is being held this Saturday, January 31st, and will be accessible online. At 2 p.m. Central, you can watch through the Adaptive Texas Facebook or by Zoom through adaptoftexas.org. The well-known disability advocate passed away last month at the age of 79. He's survived by his wife of 40 years, Stephanie Thomas, an accomplished advocate in her own right. Kafka was the Texan with a Bronx accent, with a curly mane of white hair that was instantly recognizable. He also had a special set of talents and qualities that made him a great organizer and leader in the national disability movement. Kafka was born in the Bronx and was a Vietnam veteran. He was a wheelchair user, injured in a car crash in 1973. The next year, he came to Texas, earning degrees at the University of Houston, and settled in Austin. There, he became active in the direct action group, American Disabled for Attended Programs Today, known as ADAPT. At the time, before the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADAPT worked to make Austin and its public transit system accessible to all, including people with disabilities. Nancy Crowther was a new University of Texas grad at the time who befriended Kafka and became a 40-year ADAPT colleague.
He loved to use theater when we did protests or actions. My favorite one was setting up a disabled or handicapped seating at the time outside a famous restaurant that was known by a famous gentleman who had no access into his restaurant. So we set up our own table and chairs and menus and, no seating inside for the disabled. Mm-hmm. He was fairly humiliated and angered, the owner was. And seeing that he was a big guy in the business world downtown, it was the ultimate worst thing that could happen when media showed up. So it was, lo and behold, he built a ramp and started a trend amongst other restaurants because they figured if this gentleman could be persuaded, perhaps they should follow along. And it was a historical time. It was a hilarious time, but it made such a movement that, you would think something like that was small, but it had its ramifications. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, I do believe we helped to pay for that ramp because we ate there all the time. We loved the food.
That 24-hour restaurant was Katz's Deli, which had a well-known motto.
Katz's never closes, but it did.
Kafka and ADAPT used similar tactics to make mass transit accessible.
One of the weekends, I believe it was, we just decided to go to 11th and Congress and stop buses. And we did.
So how'd you do that?
Hey, you just sit in front of one, or you chain yourself to one, or, we had a number of people that wanted to ride but couldn't. So steadily, all the buses got backed up.
They also attended every meeting and hearing that they could. They even helped test the equipment, which was no easy feat back then, which was relatively new tech.
And the rest is history. Everybody and anybody can ride. Again, lots of theater, but progressive theater.
He and Thomas also organized probably the most famous disability demonstration of them all, the Capitol Crawl. At Kafka's signal, dozens of advocates dropped from their wheelchairs and climbed the stone steps of the U.S. Capitol to demonstrate to the Congress just how determined they were to get the ADA. But Kafka was not a simple rabble-rouser. He also had a command of issues and helped develop real policies with lawmakers. Policies that are in place today, helping people live full lives in the community and not in nursing homes. Alison Barkoff is a professor at George Washington University and former head of the Administration for Community Living under President Biden.
You know, there's just so much about Bob. I mean, Bob is just such a giant in the disability movement, and he was a force in just so many ways. The couple things that stand out to me about Bob, who was a mentor and a colleague and a friend, is he wrote this manual on disability organizing, and he had a chapter called the pitchfork strategy of advocacy. And he always talks about the pitchfork strategy, and it really resonates with me. I talk about it all the time. You know, we have to use every tool in our toolbox in advocacy. You know, we absolutely have to be doing advocacy with Congress, with federal Congress and state legislatures. We have to be working with the agencies that implement the laws, so the bureaucracy. And we really need to think about media, and it's amazing you're doing this, and how do we educate the public? How do we tell our story? The way we connected a lot, he understood the role of legal advocacy and bringing lawsuits. And then, of course, activism was a huge piece for him, and protesting, and all of those pieces really mixed together. I mean, Bob was the perfect mix of the activist with the policy wonk. He would literally be outside HHS protesting, and then roll up his sleeves, and then be writing policy ideas. And I just loved that about him. And I loved how late in life he really took that kind of media focus, and I was his number one listener to Barrier Free Futures. He had that radio show that I was lucky enough to be on a few times.
Yes.
And he really was that mix of we have to use everything, and I loved that about him.
The Barrier Free Futures podcast features a one-of-a-kind list of people Kafka knows from 40 years of disability advocacy. It is a crash course in disability history and issues. The recordings and transcripts are well worth the search. Kafka was also involved in many other things, especially growing the disability vote. His disability voters group, Rev Up Texas, which stands for Register, Educate, Vote, is at, all one word, REVUP Texas.org. On the show, he says, "Don't crawl into the shadows." And he ends every episode with the message, "Don't mourn, organize." For the People's News, this is John Mohler reporting.